thank you. So I'll just give a quick project overview to remind everyone the project purpose for eTruck is to create a California research hub to facilitate and accelerate the electrification of the medium and heavy duty drayage vehicle market in key areas. And the project goals and objectives are to advance research development and demonstration activities that extend the delivery range of large weight class battery electric trucks, beginning with drayage operations. Also to engage broad stakeholders with a community first approach and use input to promote equity and workforce development opportunities in priority communities. Also that pollution burdened and impacted communities and truck fleets, charging equipment and service providers, electric utilities, and planning agencies, and to plan, design, and deploy innovative, scalable public corridor charging strategies for MDHD electric trucks, beginning with drayage trucks. Next slide, please. And just a quick recap of the Technical Advisory Committee goals, objectives, and function. The goals of this committee the goal is to guide project direction, use engagement in other committees to ensure the success of overall project goals. The objectives are to ask probing questions to ensure long-term perspective, be a sounding board on technical and financial barriers and opportunities, and identify competitive advantages, value propositions, or strengths, advocate project to build partnerships, governmental support and relationships on a national level. And lastly, the functions of this committee are knowledge of market applications, project guidance and direction, evaluate tangible benefits and linkage between projects. And with that, I will pass it on over to Yasna to review industry updates and context setting.
Great, thank you, Nate. And I just wanted to personally say good morning or good afternoon for those of you that are on the East Coast, and thank you for joining us in this TAC Advisory Committee meeting for this very large and important project that we have been working on now for a year, close to a year, actually. So I also just want to invite people to post any questions in chat. We will have time to discuss, but if you wanted to post quick questions in the chat box, please go ahead and do that. So a couple of updates that we wanted to share just from the broader industry. One is sorry, I'm seeing the teams pop up on the side. One is the Charging Conference and Festival event that happened in October up in Portland and the Electric Island. It was, for those of you that participated, it was an interesting event, really kind of talking about megawatt charging and just high power charging overall. We saw some displays of trucks as well at the Daimler facility. And then there was a full day. There was a full conference day with a lot of good discussions and conversations, actually, that happened at that forum, followed up with a day of testing, sort of with different trucks at the Electric Island. So just something to take note of, and those of you that had the time to attend that probably witnessed that it was an interesting event. The second thing that is that the megawatt charging standard sort of is open for comment. So that is something that we wanted to let folks know about. They're still collecting sort of comments and inputs on that as progress is happening. Couple of other related events, Volvo and Flying J announcing last week or two, sort of a pilot project for electric trucks that's national in scale throughout the North America. I think they're selecting specific particular Flying J sites where there'll be higher powered truck charging available. Then right here in Southern California, where our project is focused, we also wanted to highlight that Polb announced a first public charging station, I think 2 or 3. So Leela, I see you on the call. If you have time to share a little bit of info more on that, we'd love to hear. These are the first 2 that I'm aware of close to the ports that are publicly available. So that's really interesting. And then this is not a comprehensive list, but we're just trying to go over some things that might be of interest. DOE just closed their proposal period and is looking to select 2 to 3 commercial zero emission corridor planning projects under their recent DOE vehicle transportation office for area of interest 10. There's about $2.5 million available. So that's also interesting. These are specifically 18-month or 20-month projects that will focus on planning of certain corridors through that are important. So we think it's going to be pretty competitive actually, but it's exciting to see just DOE money and funding going in this direction as well. So those are just some top. Yep.
Can I just
please.
add, Michael Beerbier from DOE, just one quick added comment on that. In our fiscal year 23 budget request, and hopefully Congress seems to indicate the budget likely will get passed December, but in our 23 request, we had a much bigger $75-85 million request to then take, output from these planning grants to actually full fund several demo projects, especially if those projects can be paired up with other funding sources, maybe you get more than that. So again, that was in our request, which is public, and both of the congressional reports supported that. So there's that possibility if that when the budget passed for the next phase of this to come out.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael, for jumping in and filling that important step. We always anticipated that planning would be followed up with some actual implementation. So totally logically makes sense. And we want to continue working with you and collaborating to see how we can make the best out of it. And thank you for participating in the TAC and showing interest in what the RETA project is doing here. And anybody else, again, please feel free to jump in. We have an hour and a half, or put a comment in chat. That works too. So this sort of wraps up my section, I think, just sort of on the higher, but let me just stop. Any other comments like the good comment Michael just had? If you guys from the ports, I think we have both Port of LA and Port of Long Beach present. If you wanted to chime in, Diane, sure. I see your comment.
I can chime in on the Port of Long Beach charging stations if you want. So we did, yeah, those are there are 2 now. We have 2 charging stations. They're 150 kilowatt stations, and they are available for drayage trucks. We had a little kickoff event. I guess it was a week or 2 ago, and they are being used a little bit. We still only have about 30 or so electric trucks in our registry, so they're not being heavily used, but they are there. Folks can drive in, and it's located at our Terminal Access Center or Clean Truck Program Center at the Port of Long Beach. And yeah, we're really happy to have them and have them available for folks who need them. They are free of charge for folks to use for the drayage trucks to use for the time being. So yeah, hopefully we get more trucks, and it helps enable more folks to take delivery of their trucks, even if their own infrastructure isn't quite available yet. That's kind of what we're seeing now, is they're being used mostly by folks who are having delays in their own fleet infrastructure, and so they're coming over and charging over at these charging stations.
That's fantastic, Leela. That's fantastic. Thank you for doing that. We think it's an important step. It's 150 kilowatts. It could go higher in the future, but you providing it right there on the site and seeing the interest and the need, I think it'll be critical. We are disseminating, sharing this information broadly as well with our, we have a zero emission drayage working group as well that we're focusing on. So perfect. Thank you on that. Anybody else? And no pressure, no pressure. Okay, Nate, I think we can move on. Is it back to you now, or I have another one to cover? The progress against plan, right? Okay, so we wanted to provide you sort of an update where we are in our tasks overall in this project. Number one, we wanted to share, we have a very nice website, etruck.org, that we invite you all to click in and check out. It launched a couple of months ago, and we are now more and more using it to share information, to broadcast information. I think we're going to start putting that website also as a good communication tool for communicating with the Technology Advisory Committee. So please do look at that. The other thing we wanted to say is, in addition to the TAC, this is you guys, the Technology Advisory Committee, which is our sort of highest and biggest advisory committee. We have been successful in launching the Community for Stakeholder-Driven Engagement through the Community First Technology Advisory Committee and Subcommittee. So that has been launched, and I think we've had 1 or 2 meetings in this. So that's focused on, again, engaging members of the community and working with the communities where trucks, infrastructure, et cetera, will be present. Second, we do have the ITAC, which is the Industry Technology Advisory Committee, and its subcommittees. And this is the one that we interact on an throughout the year on specific calendar dates, but also we have the subcommittees that we pull in to advise us specifically on some of the technology aspects that are specific, sort of more into the weeds. So we've engaged with 1 or 2 subcommittees there. And last but not least, we have the Workforce Development Advisory Committees and Subcommittee, focusing on how workforce development will be following the progress and the rollout of these heavy duty trucks and high power charging, and how this will really benefit both the industry, but the communities as well, where implementation is happening. So that's on the committee's sort of task. Next, you all know we have 2 pilot sites, both located here in Southern California. One is at the Travel Centers of America off of the I-10. The second one is in Carson at an MHX facility. We are continuing to work with those 2 pilot sites with planning, site sort of description, site plans. So that's an ongoing task that we have been heavily engaged in. And our EPRI colleagues here specifically are actually leading that and can speak to it more if necessary. Another important component is the lab development at Southern California Edison. And I think we have Jordan Smith. Thank you, Jordan, for being here, who can elaborate on that if needed. But just wanted to say the part of the lab is that we're building out this lab at the beautiful facilities at SCE, where equipment can be tested, various equipment that is relative to the high power charging, and it can be tested in conjunction with the pilot sites, but also before it's rolled out at the pilot sites. Next, we're working on a truck maturity assessment and survey. So we have a survey prepared. We're going to engage with all the truck OEMs to understand where what their plans are for having high power charging on the trucks, and similar what their dates are, as well as where they are right now. So that's one component. And the other component is a good and deep survey of charging infrastructure. That's something that EPRI is leading again. So it's communication and getting a status of where all the hardware stands right now in terms of the charging infrastructure. So I'll stop there for a moment, see whether Watson, you from EPRI or anybody else wanted to add any comments, or somebody from the CalSTART team.
So I was going to pause before I said anything for any questions before I talk about anything. Is there any questions or on this? So what I'll talk about just to set up the discussion is this: the CEC solicitation had a targeted level of performance for the charging infrastructure that's as part of this plan, and it was targeted towards public charging infrastructure also. So the targeted level of performance that in the CEC solicitation, the project that we're executing on, it puts us into the zone where we need to be looking at MCS level charging, levels of charging, megawatt power levels of charging, in order to achieve that targeted level of performance that was established. So that's kind of where we're aiming for, and the technology level in this project, and so we want to make advancements towards that level with our pilot sites and our lab work and understanding. That's why we're doing these surveys, is to understand how we can get to that targeted level of performance. When is that coming in the marketplace? That's the purpose of those activities.
Can I ask for clarification? The CEC grant said it was basically required minimum of 1 megawatt charger, but the charging works up to 3.75. What range are you targeting for your work?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a great question, because that's why we're doing all these surveys and trying to understand, because there's things that have to happen on the truck side to get to that to that 3 multi-megawatt level you're talking about. There's things that have to happen on the charging infrastructure side, and as we'll talk about in a little bit, there is the MCS connector standard isn't official yet, and so that's a bit of a thing we're working through. So I think we're aiming for getting infrastructure at these pilot sites that approaches the megawatt level, and just because that's what we can execute in the near term, but we want to set up the lab to be able to test at these higher power levels with systems. But if folks are aware of infrastructure that we could be looking at, that's why we have this TAC, is to learn, learn from the larger community of what we should be looking at.
Michael Barrowby here at DOE. I guess, are you currently working with people like at the National Renewable Energy Lab who are helping working on the testing development for those kind of the standard and the charging?
Yeah. NREL is a subrecipient in the project. So Andrew Meintz is involved, and we talk to Andrew regularly about his activities and try and connect the dots. And so that's the purpose of what we're trying to do, is be a little bit of the connective tissue on some of those activities, so that we're not duplicating things.
Perfect. Yeah, if Andrew's the right guy, if you need any added support in that realm, then certainly you can let me or Mike Laughlin, who's on from DOE as well, know. But staying connected with them, utilizing them as a resource, that's what they're there for, to help with these types of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do take part in the 21st Century Truck meetings, Michael, and talk with Andrew and Michael and the team. And those are excellent meetings, by the way, and exchanges for this type of information. Yeah. But this is not an easy task, I will say. We were all, I think, expecting, oh, Megawatt is going to come out and just plow through it, right? It's not as simple as we all thought. So we're just kind of letting you all know where we are and on the different tasks. Mind you, we have 10 different tasks in this project. And where we are in all those elements, but I think we're going to dive in a little bit deeper as we go to the next slides and have time to have a conversation. So Nate, just remind us, please, what are the next slides here now?
We're going to be going into the technology transfer plan, a quick overview of that, and also a quick discussion feedback segment, which Tuan will now take care of.
Great. Thank you, Nate. Hi, everyone. I'm going to spend a few minutes to go over our technology transfer plan, which is part of the project's approach to communicate and share lessons learned with various state and national partners. So the first chapter of the plan covers the purpose and intention of the plan. The plan is structured to build a framework on how information is shared and how knowledge is transferred through e-truck outreach and communications, to establish communications and technology transfer pathways such as workshops, conferences, and meetings, to identify the key stakeholder groups that are the intended audience of information and understand the unique position of each stakeholder group, to develop a process for aggregating and disseminating relevant information to the appropriate target audience in an appropriate manner, and finally, to guide the development of future related projects to support the build out of key zero emission corridors. When we developed this plan, we identified a few important themes for technology transfer. They include community considerations, medium and heavy duty trucking, charging 101, research progress on high power charging, grid reliability and impact mitigation, MDHD truck corridors, zero emission drayage, landscape barriers and solutions, workforce development opportunities, technology demonstrations, and economic and business model innovation. Moving on to chapter 3, which includes an overview of the stakeholder system. The figure on the slide represents our approach to organizing stakeholders based on core impacts for the program's goals and objectives, as well as promoting technology transfer activities. And it's important to note that many of these stakeholders listed here are already part of our 4 advisory committees. In this chapter, we identified several activities and methods of engagement that will support effective communication and information sharing. They include website development and management, our advisory committees, journal articles and conference presentations, community first webinar series, educational workshops, technology showcase symposiums, and media marketing and management, which contains our social media plan, where we plan to curate specific contents on different social media platforms such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. So through this plan, we focus the technology transfer efforts to achieve several specific outcomes. First, we want to establish a central online interactive hub of information about high power EV infrastructure and charging technologies. We want to create and maintain open communication channels to create discussion and dialogue about EV adoption and infrastructure deployment. We want to offer forums for pre-competitive industry collaboration along with community engagement to education and inform policy and regulatory efforts. And we want to attract partners that can support phase 2 of the project, which is the corridor development. Lastly, in regards to the plan and reporting, the project will establish a series of key performance indicators, also known as KPI, regarding the sharing of information through the technology transfer plan, including KPI regarding outreach, communication, and marketing efforts associated with sharing of key outcomes and learnings from the project. This will also include KPI regarding the variety of stakeholders that will be included in communications about the project. Product downloads will also be measured from the website. In regards to privacy, we'll utilize only the Google suite of scripts for audience tracking and follow current laws and standards regarding cookie notification. Additionally, eTruck will also monitor key developments and report regularly to key stakeholders on important updates related to technology transfer. And with that, I'll pass it back to Nate for discussion and feedback.
Thanks, Tuan. So I know Tuan covered a lot of ground right now for our technology transfer plan, and really we're just interested in seeing what you all think is good, what might be missing, what, if anything, should be changed. If anyone has any feedback they want to discuss right now, chime in either in the chat or by unmuting yourself, but also we're leaving this open for email until a week out from now. John, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Nathan, hello, everyone. This is John McKillen at EPA. Just a question / comment about the assessment of the trucking landscape. I know that the immediate objectives of the project are focused on drayage and short haul applications, but it would be helpful to at least have a qualitative discussion about long haul applications and the relevance of megawatt charging for over the road Class 8 tractors, given that they are the bulk of emissions and fuel consumption in the heavy duty vehicle sector. And certainly megawatt charging infrastructure may enable fleets to adopt better electric powertrain technology, whereas 150 kilowatt or 350 kilowatt DC fast may not. So it would be really helpful to have some insights included in the technology transfer plan regarding long haul applications. And I have a couple other questions, but I'll wait for the discussion period.
No, that's good. Really great feedback there. That's exactly what we're looking for. We'll try to figure out a way to incorporate that into our tech transfer plan. I'm sure it fits into one of our key themes pretty nicely. So thanks for that. And I see Michael, you have your hand raised.
Yep, Mike Laughlin, Department of Energy Vehicle Technologies Office, part of Michael Bearby's Sustainable Transportation Group. One of the things I wanted to ask as part of the technology integration program that works with Clean Cities coalitions across the country, are you taking advantage of the Clean Cities network in California to do some of that technology transfer? Because they're certainly well tied into a lot of communities.
Clean Cities Network. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at our current plans off the top of my head. I don't know.
I don't think we are, Michael. That's a good reminder.
Okay.
Yes. I think at the point where we are, we weren't exactly ready, but I think your point is well taken. We have, some 12 or 15 in California.
Yes,
I think,
yes, there's
right?
quite a group.
In California alone. And we definitely, that's a good reminder. We definitely could use them as the outreach arm for the tech transfer. Thanks for that reminder. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for the link in the chat also. It's helpful. Brandon, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I'll just throw out, I know at CAR, we put together especially on our truck stop website, zero emission heavy duty vehicle specific information. And then there's the Transforming Trucks website that CalSTART has also put together. And so this one sounds like there's an enormous amount of overlap in terms of sort of the Trucks 101, ZEV 101. And just to keep that in mind as you're building it. I don't see a lot of value in reproducing what's already been reproduced several times. I could list other websites that also go through the same information as well. Otherwise, it sounds good.
Got it. Yeah, and we're definitely trying to keep in mind what's being done, especially at within other CalSTART projects, so that
like the HFIP website repeats a lot of it. The Energize website repeats a lot of it. The Cal EVIP 2.0 website is reproducing a lot of it, right? Not to mention any of the 5 major utilities website in California. So, yeah.
Got it. Yeah, thanks. I'm just giving another sec if anyone else has anything they wanted to say. And if not, we can move on to the next section. So we thought it would be useful for us to just briefly talk about the CalSTART Zero Emission Drayage Coordination Group that we kicked off earlier this month. And the purpose of this group is to understand the drayage electrification landscape, its challenges, opportunities, and it's really there to provide a forum for stakeholders to collaborate with one another. I think there's real value in connecting all these different organizations and entities that don't typically have a forum to communicate. And another purpose is to build consensus on solutions to advance zero emission drayage. The goal of this group is to work with stakeholders to develop solutions to increase the successful deployment of zero emission trucks and infrastructure for port drayage in California. And like I said, that was kicked off earlier this month, and that's very much in line with some key themes for technology transfer, like the zero emission drayage bullet point that we went through above. And so the next slide, please. The objectives of this drayage coordination group are to identify barriers to zero emission transportation adoption for independent owner operators and fleets in drayage market, to develop recommendations on solutions to address key barriers to adoption, like technology costs, publicly accessible charging, and technical assistance, to develop strategy to support site host partnership development to increase deployment of charging infrastructure at publicly accessible locations along key freight corridors and freight hubs, and to evaluate best methodologies to support incentive coordination between all these different funding programs like HVIP, Energize, and other partnership funding programs. And I think that is it for the drayage coordination group. Just wanted to really highlight that work being done there. And I will pass it on over to Watson for this next section.
Great. Now, and this part, you know, please jump in, and we'll have, this is intended to be a discussion, open discussion around the challenges and the path forward that we're looking at. When I look at what the things as we progress through this project and advance through it, there's some challenges we run into. Some of them are like related to us, just, you know, working through the challenges that are laid out through the normal course of business and relate to the deliverables of our solicitation and our project. And then there's another set of challenges that we're running into, and which is on the far right-hand side, which we're starting to point at, that we're running into. They're not the objectives of what we're pursuing in the project, but our experience and the things we're asking and the questions we're asking, we're running across a lot of lessons learned, and so the question is how. You know, and a lot of them deal with the scalability. How do you grow this market beyond this? How does the site, you know, have 10 megawatt level chargers at its location? How those kind of things? Those are scalable issues, and we think of that as that's something we want to make sure we're communicating those lessons learned, but we're trying to find the right avenue and the right place to do that. So. On the starting on the left side on the technology part, you know, again, that targeted level of performance was aiming towards MCS, megawatt charging standards, and what we're learning through this process, there's different power levels even within MCS. That people are talking about MCS level 1, level 2, and level 3, even within the MCS standards. And activities, and the messy part that we ran into is with this project is that the trucks and the chargers aren't in marketplace. The trucks and chargers that are in the marketplace are using the CCS infrastructure. So that's the messy part of the project we have. And so how does that impact us? It impacts us on the test gear that we can have at the SC lab. It impacts what we deploy to pilot sites. So that's, you know, so we're looking at the alternatives of what we can get today and implement today, so we can continue learning, even though it may not be at the full targeted level of performance. The second thing is you know, with a lot of infrastructure projects, supply chain issues continue to rear their ugly head, and it's now on switchgear. You know, the big electrical panels for these power levels. They're now build to order kind of stuff. So we're looking at delivery times that are probably around a year. So that's even longer than the delivery times for the charging hardware itself or other supporting systems there. So what you end up having to do with projects is you do a little bit of out of sequence procurement, and we're working through that. And then as we talked about the scalability issue. So I think, you know, to set it up, Nate, I think on the next slide, you have your question and just more of a discussion over this first topic that we laid out on the next slide. Okay. Advance. There we go. I'm just rolling these together. So the question is, so if you look at like the Charin Festival that occurred in Portland, there was a charger that showed up there. It was plugged into an extension cord, frankly. Like it wasn't a true MCS charger. And so there's a lot of interest and intention that we want to advance that MCS level chargers. So the question is while the standards look like it's a mid-year 2023, 2024 kind of timeline till the standards resolve themselves. Is there anything we should be looking at on the technology side, you know, from other folks' perspective on, you know, how we can kind of advance, you know, our target is MCS charging, and we want to be planning for that, and we want to be, you know, setting in place infrastructure for that. But is there, how do we kind of get from where we are today with CCS chargers and trucks and the infrastructure to that future? Any guidance or thoughts around that question? So Brandon, you were asking questions about MCS earlier. So yeah,
I'm in here and type me a note. My colleague Leslie's on this. I mean, one solution, and I'm just staff, but I mean, if you're brainstorming requiring an HFIP, that an MCS connector be included, right, in the next round of California HFIP funding. It is certainly just like they've done with the school buses requiring minimum VGI hardware, software on board. As would be a strategy. Otherwise, I don't see a great. It's the classic chicken and the egg, right? Where right until you actually put this charger in, right off the 710 freeway, right? Nobody's gonna be able to charge, but nobody's building the trucks yet to use it. So, and I'm not on the ground.
This is Leslie. We like to be technology forcing. We have countless examples of attempts to put standards into rules for compliance, right? You know, it's a real scary thing to do until there's like a lot of consensus on what MCS charging is going to look like. So I realize from this discussion we're pretty far away from it, but until we get there, and you know, Charin has and all of the players in Charin have circled around a standard, you know, that's acceptable. That's why everyone's using CCS. It's because it's there, and CCS is moving. I think we're moving up to a 350, and so the trucks are, you know, getting together, and they're upping their ability to charge at a fast rate at 350, but all sides have to circle around You know, the charging infrastructure side of it and the truck side of it have to really collaborate and agree before we can start pushing for it. There's just going to have to be like a happy medium there, but it's an interesting thing to put on the table, Brandon. But I would say I wouldn't be putting it on the table at least for another year. And it all depends on how things are going with this standard.
Yeah.
Well, the other thought I had as I'm listening in on this is the need for it. You know, at what point? I mean, I get that we're trying to, you know, do the long distance thing and everything, but right now there's the need seems to be circling around just trying to figure out how we're going to be able to charge the drayage trucks that have the 200-mile daily duty cycle, and be able to charge those trucks so that they can, you know, operate on more than one shift in a day. And I definitely think, yes, that there's a need for MCS, but you know, I just have a looming worry in the future of like, this is going to be a really huge investment. And if we're able to really jump in with hydrogen to start filling this need, you know, a little bit farther in, you know, into the future, maybe on the same timeline that we're going to be able to circle around, collaborate on an MCS standard, and come up with more efficient ways to upgrade the grid so you can supply the power to the truck stops without passing too many costs on to ratepayers. I mean, we might be on the same trajectory as hydrogen. And we are hearing from fleets that they do prefer a solution like that if it existed. So, yeah, just, you know, throwing water on it because we have an hour and a half here.
No, those are great. That's great comments. You really appreciate that. You know, I'll just, you know, add a couple things. One of the things we're hearing from some of our early discussions on these truck interviews is that, and there's one manufacturer that actually is doing this now, is having 2 charging ports on the truck. So essentially it's having a dual CCS on the truck. So that way you can get theoretically 700 kW into the truck at a time, as you know, with 2 separate connectors into the battery packs, as a one way to bridge that gap. The other thing that, you know, like what worries me is that, and this happened in the light duty space, is one of the automakers wanted to move faster than the rest of the industry. So they moved forward with their own proprietary connector because they wanted to move fast.
They're doing that with the semi as well.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm worried about, is we may have, because somebody may want to move faster than the standards, we may end up with that kind of situation again. So yeah, I don't know, Leslie, you were commenting on that, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what we can do about that, but I know that one automaker doesn't have nearly as much leverage at our agency as they used to. So
okay.
Anecdotal here.
Right.
But let me comment maybe on, Leslie, this is Jasna Thomas from CalSTART, on your question on the need. And, you know, we are, I think, first of all, this is a research project, right? A research and demo project. But we see the need for both, for hydrogen and for this high power infrastructure. And that the places where the high power, and this is why this project was geared towards public charging, is that at the public charging sites, you know, you can't afford to have a truck sitting for a couple of hours necessarily. So those are the events where you want a truck to come by, be there, whether 15 minutes or half an hour. Whereas depot charging is, the trucks will definitely have more time available. to charge longer. So it's the public charging, whether it's for drayage or regional delivery trucks equally, and then opening up the window for the long haul, which John McKillen was mentioning. That is sort of the stepping stone to getting us to, interstate corridors, et cetera.
Can I ask, have we been hearing anything from the manufacturers about what they're doing for connectors?
Yeah, so I think what we covered here is that, yeah, the CCS is the one they're looking at right now while working on MCS. But we just completed our draft, our questionnaire. And so we're having one-on-one interviews with all the truck OEMs, actually pretty detailed questions along these lines. So we don't have the answers yet on that, but we are going to engage with all of the truck makers on this question. John, you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that was a good segue to one of the questions I had on my bike rack from earlier in terms of the truck maturity assessment and kind of the timing of that. Because I do think, like Brandon was saying earlier, it's such a key chicken and egg issue in terms of product availability, even for a demo scale fleet, commitments from at least a subset of OEMs that can actually deploy the tractors that we would need to couple with the MCS capable EVSE. It's kind of like, how do the OEMs that are in the coalition of the willing, in terms of first movers into the marketplace, how do they want to elect to configure their onboard charging bus to marry with a EVSE component? I know Charin, and like Leslie was saying, that proceeding will roll out on its own cycle and we won't really have control over that. But I think given the duration of the commitment for EPRI and CalCert to the CEC, you guys kind of have to start to deliver findings sooner than I think Charin will be able to reach consensus on a standard. So, as industry innovates in real time, and as there's hopefully going to be a international consensus about communication standards and coupler configuration and power ratings for different levels, this group has to figure out, how do we do it at a demo scale? And I think in the interim, Watson posed in this discussion question, I think a really key issue for this project partnership is we may need to kind of break from the norm of, SAE and Charin and decide to kind of venture out onto the bleeding edge and say, okay, we have an EVSE provider. We have one or more OEMs who are willing to build like a bench scale demo model that has, a bespoke infrastructure component and a bespoke onboard charging bus. And we're just going to figure out what we can from an operational basis on that level. And then understanding that the findings of such may be antiquated by the time the project is completed. But in order to reach the commitment that the commission has funded you for under this project, I feel like you're probably going to need to take some risk in that regard, and hopefully find some private sector partners on the manufacturing side who are willing to do so. Otherwise, you're really not going to be able to get an in-use demonstration. You're just not going to be able to get there in time. And that just unfortunately is what it is. I think we all in this group would like to have something that has a project with accepted configuration, the findings of which would have lasting utility for the marketplace. But I just feel like, as often is the case, California is ahead of the curve. The commission has issued a contract for research in this space, and there likely will have to be some order of a bench scale set of equipment that goes out for initial commercial piloting, and then obviously iterating as Charin and others reach kind of agreement on what will be the market standards for infrastructure and obviously onboard vehicle communication and power acceptance for the BMS. So just a couple of thoughts here, because it's a segue actually really well to one of the questions that I'd hoped to pose earlier, because it really is all about timing. And unfortunately, EPRI and CalCert are in a position where you've kind of catalyzed activity prior to, the industry at large. So kudos to you, but you also have kind of painted yourselves in a corner.
Well, thanks for that last thought, John.
You feel my pain, John. So
I will say that the project really, the scale of the project and the breadth of it is that it's covering more than just the infrastructure piece and the hardware piece. It's really also about learning about the business case, understanding, how how charging happens at these types of sites, what the business case looks like for pilot sites of this sort. So there's a lot of other important findings in this overall project beyond just the hardware and the matchup of high power charging. But I totally agree with you. We're going to have to bring it to as far as we can, and while trying to push for the best options available. We are, as Watson identified, also in this unfortunate situation that some of the hardware, related to switchgear and things is just not easily available beyond just the MCS that we're trying to push for.
Yeah, and before I go to the next area, I did want to go back to one of the earlier questions from, I think it was John, had around this discussion of long haul truck and what they need for infrastructure versus the drayage truck. I think that's a really great question, John, because I think what Leslie was talking about this too is it, to some extent, CCS may be good enough for the drayage trucks that have, shorter distances, and maybe even this dual CCS may be good enough for the drayage trucks, given their routes and distances that they're doing that out of the port, where they're doing, less than a couple 100 miles a day, but it's clear that the long haul trucks, that's probably not good enough for them, and so how do we serve both masters there, where the drayage, the trucks exist in the drayage market that work for that application, the charging standard works for that application, and it can move forward. And so anyway, John, I'm curious to hear your reaction of those two different segments, and whether there's an integrated approach to those two different segments, or is it a single approach?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one bureaucrat's best guess,
Okay.
in response to your question there. I mean, I think, for the time being, it's obvious that OEMs are producing product in the 7 and 8 classes that are, compliant with CCS. And like Leslie said, right now we're looking at 150. Some are going to do dual coupler 150. Yeah. Many of the projects EPA is involved in right now and actually has that architecture with dual coupler 150 on board with like a class 8 tractor. Whether that remains to be the case, we'll have to wait and see over the next several model years. As that coupler connector and the communication standards are verified by the OEMs for 350, like you were just saying, 750 kilowatt capability for onboard power in most drayage applications should be sufficient to enable 2 shifts per day. Particularly if it's, that 200 to 250 mile return to pickup kind of scenario for duty cycle. But again, I mean, that's one opinion based on what we're seeing now at the pilot scale and with initial early commercial deployments from OEMs like Volvo and Freightliner. And we'll have to wait and see as more products and more OEMs start to insert investments into the space and have fleet partnerships to deploy, what kind of congeals around power needs. Because, it may be sufficient, it may not for some cases. Some may want to have the ability to have on-route charging for megawatt because they have limited depot charging capability. That's one circumstance that we are seeing with some of our demo scale fleets that just don't have power on site to be able to enable depot charging, and may in fact need megawatt capable public charging in order to just get drayage operations up and running, say in like the South Coast area, for example. I don't know if I answered your question. That was a little bit of a rambling response, but just some insights from the field as we see it today. And obviously it's a moving target, but it's possible. I mean, the upshot of it and the kind of short answer is it is possible. In the meantime, it would be nice to have both options. Again, assuming we have an OEM and an EVSP who's able to give us, the infrastructure technology and the onboard charging component that would enable a higher power of charging at 1 megawatt or higher.
Is there any chat questions before we move on to the next topic area? Anything from the chat that we should bring up here?
Yeah, I think Leslie brought up a question also whether we're considering high power wireless charging. Did you want to answer that, Watson?
We've been looking, just because of the power levels, we've been looking mostly at the conductive chargers, just because of the power levels. But I do appreciate that wireless can, is really attractive because of the ability to not have labor that has to handle cords and things like that. There's a number of advantages there, but
Yeah,
we
and I
are
will-
asking questions, but it's
Yeah, I will add, we should look at, I think Kenworth truck had a DOE funded project that I believe has completed that was looking at higher power wireless charging. And
Okay.
I do remember that they ran into some issues. Anyway, we should look at the learnings from that
Yeah.
particular funded project. But the other thing I would say is like, yeah, a lot of the truck makers are not necessarily going in that direction. So that would require yet another piece of adaptation on the truck.
and any other comments there?
There's a question
Oh.
about considerations about battery swapping.
Oh.
Yeah, we have another company that has approached us with that here at CalSTART. I don't know whether we shared that with EPRI. So battery swapping is another one that really depends on, is the format of the batteries going to be the same on all of the trucks that could allow that quick swap that is required. So that one, I would say for the moment, at least, is even further down the line than the wireless.
But great question, because that is like, if you're trying to put the power deliver power into the vehicles quick. Now, what I would say is one of the business models out there that we're seeing is instead of battery swapping, they're doing truck swapping essentially, or cab swapping. So essentially one way to achieve that without going through all that technical stuff that Yazda was talking about and outlining is actually if you switch out the cabs themselves. And there's a company that, now it's a little bit of a different business model for the users of it, because they charge a per mile fee to use that service, but essentially what it is accomplishing the same effect of battery swapping is you get a new fresh battery. So I see
that Brandon has his
Yeah.
hand up, and I was just going to comment. Truck swapping is what some of the drayage trucks are doing right now and complaining about it.
So,
Or cab swapping, yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, Brandon, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask John, any thoughts or comments on the ability for these battery packs to take that megawatt level charge rate and the impacts on the actual battery and battery chemistries?
Yeah.
So a couple things. What's going on, and I'll start touching into the geek end of things. To get higher power levels, you essentially need to up the voltage that the vehicles operate at. That's one part of it, and then you have to have this term that people use in the industry, higher C rates, which means how fast you can put energy into batteries. And so that's what this MCS standard does, is enables us to get to higher voltages so that you can put higher power levels into the vehicles. And the way that this dual CCS gets around that challenge is it stays at lower battery pack voltages, but it splits the pack while it's charging. And so anyway, so sorry for geeking out on the second on you.
No, I'm fine with see, are the physical battery cells capable of taking a charge in a megawatt, or ideally in a few years, like 3 or 3 megawatt rates without high degradation? Have you?
Can I add to it? And Brandon's question is, I see where he's going, and I geek out on the C-rate thing as well.
Okay.
So
Right
the
group.
trucks, I mean, that's a battery design on specific to the truck. So doesn't the truck whole battery system have to be designed with a high, using maybe LTO or a high C-rate battery to be able to accept megawatt charging?
Yeah, it's how it like what you're getting at, Leslie. They had to do some configuration stuff inside the vehicles to get to those power levels, because you're right, you can't. Yeah, yeah, it's yeah.
So you're
That's
either going
why
to have a truck that's designed to go longer distance and charge at a high megawatt rate, or you're going to have a truck that's designed for these shorter distances and can handle, the CCS charging system. So this multi-purpose battery electric truck seems to me like it's going to be a bit of a challenge.
Thank you. That you put it perfectly, Leslie.
All
There
you
you
need
go.
is bigger hydrogen tank, more hydrogen storage on a fuel cell truck, by the way. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, because there's going to be a whole new architecture inside of the trucks to get to the megawatt power level charging. They had to redesign everything. They can't leverage what's exists today. So that's why it's anyway.
Hey, Watson, maybe in the interest of time, we could move to question 2.
Perfect, great. So, so we're looking at this one. We can go through a little quicker. We're, the switch gears we're looking at, which is the front end, the interface between the utility side of the world and what happens at the host sites. That switch gear has a 60-week lead time, 50-60-week lead time right now for the quotes we're getting on this, which is beyond the timeline for receiving other components. And so one of the ways we're dealing with that, we're evaluating dealing with that is that we order switchgear before everything else is designed for these demonstration sites. That's one way of approaching it. But the question is we're starting to look at timelines even for these, and as the NEVI money starts rolling out, we're expecting that the switchgear issue is going to continue to persist. Because there's going to be even more projects looking for these higher power, load centers. So the question is like, does this make us think about the timeline for our projects? Does it actually at the end match up, with the MCS, and is there an opportunity for us to be actually first in line for an MCS charger, given that we're going to have to wait, essentially a year for the switchgear? So just kind of reactions to because our plan right now is to move forward at these demonstration sites with dual CCS chargers. And that's our plan A right now. So any reaction to our plan A? No one's saying that's a crazy idea. No one's saying, why don't you be first in line for MCS? But it's going to delay our project more. That's yeah.
Yeah, it's an issue in the industry. The transformers have a year-plus wait time.
Yeah.
And the Defense Production Act was enacted, so it's not made up either, right?
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, so I think we're just going to continue unless we get some great ideas. As John raised his hand, I think maybe he's got.
Well, just for all of us, could you guys remind us on kind of the overall timeline for the commitment to CEC and kind of when you have to complete this project with whatever deliverables you have? Kind of the drop dead date?
The open.
'Cause I think that will help us all guide you in terms of strategies and contingencies. Because there's many issues that are kind of act of God type stuff since COVID. It's kind of changed the whole landscape for everything.
Yeah, I'm opening up the timeline. So the whole project has initial timeline that finishing up in Q1 of 2025. We were expecting to have the pilot sites completed in the latter part of 2023 and collecting data for a year. And so concluding in latter part of 2024, we would have a year of data out of the demonstration sites. That's the plan that we have.
So with that timeline in mind, I mean, you basically would need to secure a commitment for an EVSC partner within the next quarter in order to start construction. And then obviously to be able to complete it by the end of the calendar year and get at least a year of data collection. You know, you basically would have to have the station operational by January of 2024.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't give you a whole lot of time. And obviously, if there's interconnection issues with whatever service area it ends up being, whether it's LADWP or SCE, depending on what site hosts, you know, you guys elect to work with, you know, even if you start ordering the gear now for the back end, you still don't have kind of the coupler and pedestal and actual charger components kind of spec'd and committed to by an industry partner. So backcasting from that end date of, say, you know, March of 2025 for a final report to CEC, you know, you guys are kind of already behind in terms of the lead time needed for construction and industry commitments for specifications and design. So I you know, your ideas about, you know, purchase orders and getting the back end infrastructure seems sound, but you still have kind of the interface issues remaining. And who knows what type of supply component, you know, what kind of components and supply chain issues might present themselves, particularly if it is a bespoke system.
Yeah. Yes. So the dual CCS system we have quotes for that, and so we have a path forward for that. Yeah, but great comments. Yeah, that we, you know, it's now to everything has to line up perfectly now, timing wise.
So the contingency plan kind of worst case scenario is to go with kind of a dual CCS at 350 per coupler.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's like the worst case scenario. And obviously that's mostly off the shelf technology that would be slightly modified. Okay. Well, that gives me some comfort. Even though it wouldn't truly be megawatt, it would still be a much higher power than what we're seeing in the field right now. So it would be a modest incremental innovation.
Yes. Yeah. So that's what we're aiming for instead of waiting for the MCS. But Leslie is okay. Great. Leslie gave a thumbs up on that. Perfect. I'll move on to the next one. This is super helpful. Appreciate the comments and you know, please raise your hand or type chat questions here. So like there's lessons learned that we're gaining from this project that are outside the explicit scope of the RETA. And so I kind of wanted to share, again, this is the steering committee, the TAC, give us guidance. To understand what opportunities we have to share these lessons learned. Some of these things aren't like deliverables, so to speak, from the RETA project, but there are things that we're running into. And I'm the kind of person, when I see a problem, I want to tell people, hey, like, look, we've learned this. And I want to share those things. And there's not always the right forums for those kind of lessons learned. well, I shouldn't say the right form. We're looking for the appropriate ways to share those lessons learned so that they're treated as like ways that we're trying to help advance the industry and not like identified as criticisms or anything like that. They're the ways we can kind of help inform future efforts. And one of the examples I'll give is kind of what we know now from looking at these sites is if we do MCS chargers and you're going to develop a trucking plaza, travel plaza that has, you know, a dozen MCS chargers on it, you're essentially going to have to build a utility substation on that site. And so there's like lessons learned like that. We're getting better understanding of how these drayage operators think about pricing for their and how it like from the electricity and how it impacts their total cost of ownership. We're starting to get these kind of lessons learned, and we want to share those, but we want to share it in the right way and with the right groups. So any thoughts around how we can communicate better with the outside world on some of these lessons learned? So yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, certainly some of these lessons learned are things that DOE would be happy to help you share. You know, we have a lot of connections through Clean Cities and through other, you know, research through the national labs. The NREL is a great place to help share some of those things. Some of these things can turn into case studies on the alternative fuels data center. You know, those things get to a wide variety of audiences. So you know, certainly DOE has resources, avenues of communication that could share things that don't necessarily fit within your report. So, you know, happy to talk further about that. I'm sure Michael Berby would support that as well.
Okay, no, that's a great offer. No, thank you. Yeah, Mary. Hey, Mary.
I would suggest, though, that you try and present these findings at some very general forums like Fourth Roadmap or the you know, the Advanced Clean Truck one that's in Long Beach, or at EVS this summer, you know, in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Those kind of forums where it's not necessarily quite so technical, but where policymakers are going to be trying to figure out, you know, what are we going to try and fund and where are we going to try and develop incentive programs and craft incentives. What do we want to see in pilots, and what do we want to invest in longer term? You need maybe a little bit of more of a lay audience. That'd be my recommendation.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, because it's somewhat of a different audience we're trying to reach with some of those lessons learned, and that's a great idea. Great idea.
I would just ask one other thing. Do you have more than one manufacturer who will be providing you with this dual CCS?
We have a line of sight into a couple and manufacturers that could do that, and or a number of them, and largely because it is fairly you know, regular CCS chargers are commercial items, and so we do have visibility into multiple supply chains. The one that we're focusing on has the possibility that it can be converted to an MCS in the future, but it's not a certainty that it could be, but it has the possibility.
But if there's any possibility that this might be a market niche that will evolve, is having dual CCS, then I would encourage trying to use multiple manufacturers' vehicles if you can, and try and kind of almost be a proof of concept for that as a transition or as in addition to MCS charging.
Okay. No, thank you.
Just food for thought.
Appreciate
Yeah, and
it.
Mary, I would just jump in to say, we're not married to one truck OEM. We are actually in conversations with all of them because we want all of them to move.
And Patricia, how you doing?
Yes, good. So I was just going to suggest that our agency, we were thinking we really should host an infrastructure summit or forum to discuss these kinds of issues. I think all the discussion questions that we've done so far are really, I mean, there's still some things to be sorted out. And we're just trying to think here at our agency across all of our incentive programs, across all our demonstration and deployment projects that we do. How could we be further assisting fleets on electrification? Because we have some of these big projects where we've got fleets that have 50 battery electric trucks they're getting next year, and they've been told by the utility that unfortunately the grid, there just isn't power at that particular location that can be brought to bear anytime soon. Like, it would take years. So what are the solutions? And so that is something that we've been really actively thinking about. And we just thought, I think it would be great early next year to bring everyone together to have this type of discussion, because and maybe expand it to others, because yes, it's something we're all thinking about and struggling with, and we have to incentivize the trucks, but we also have to create a pathway for the infrastructure. And how do we do that? That's not a short conversation, but
Yeah,
just wanted to bring that up.
No, that's, yeah, and so we should talk more about that, yeah, of how we can collaborate on that.
Totally, thanks.
That's great.
Like a more near-term pathway while these
Yes, because
while
we have
these longer-term solutions are getting figured out. Honestly,
Yeah.
I think the HVIP is running into those issues. You guys, demos
Yes.
are. That's totally understandable, and we're happy to participate in that.
That sounds great.
Mary, you have your hand up for another comment, please.
Yes, I do. So I'll lower it right now. So one of the things that we hear constantly from the bigger truck OEMs is, of course, the concern that utilities have to have a service request before they can get started on building anything out. And that, given the timelines involved in developing multiple megawatt charging sites, that I like the idea that it's really basically a whole new utility substation is a way to think about that. Is there any, is in California or any other state that you're aware of, are there any policy, or legislative or regulatory policies that are in the works that would consider some strategy to kind of get around that, to enable anticipatory building of demand, of capacity for the electric grid, in order to anticipate, future megawatt charging for medium and heavy duty trucks? Or
Yeah. The quick comment, that's a good question. The quick comment I would say, I know we have only a few minutes left here, is the California Public Utilities Commission actually has a new ruling that's looking at how to have the utilities focused on that interconnect, and they're going to actually they're proposing to have a third party do the charge ready type of programs, I believe. So there's a bit of a shift as we speak, I guess, happening at California Public Utility Commission, how to, have the utilities focus on what they're good at and how to have others help them. So that's the one that they can offer. We've all are experiencing the bottleneck in that regard.
And unrelated to Retta, I'm leading another project inside of EPRI that's actually trying to tackle that issue that you talked about. And so it's part of a regulatory approach, and it's part of another part of the system is creating some tools and practices that enable that to happen. And so, but it's not related to Retta, but I do have another project.
Would you all just follow up with me on that? I would, big issue here, so really appreciate it.
Okay, perfect, yeah,
Thank you.
perfect. So, Nathan, I think we just had a open discussion here on things that weren't necessarily tied to those three discussion points, but Nathan, you want to transition to that?
Yeah, sure. We can move on to the next. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Sure. Super.
Okay, yeah, I'll take care of next steps then. For the technical advisory committee, we would appreciate feedback, any additional feedback on the tech transfer plan by a week from today. So 12/7, I know it'd be helpful for you all to have the slides as reference for that. So we'll try to get that out ASAP. And then also any additional feedback on project challenges, that's pretty open. You can email that to me, or if we go to the next slide, you'll see all of our contact information if you want to have further discussions. And we'll be sending out the slides, like I said, and I guess we're good to move on to the last slide.
No, I really appreciate the dialogue. This was so rich, much richer than I actually expected, and appreciate the dialogue and openness, and that's super helpful for us. I don't know, Yasna, do you want to add anything to that, or?
No, I too, yes, I appreciate the hands raised, the comments made. We invite you to give us comments post this by email, or feel free to reach out. I think we have our contacts on one of the slides here. Feel free to set up a call with any of us from the larger team. We do depend on you and appreciate your input.
Yeah, no, I feel lucky to have this discussion. It was really great, really helpful to us, and so thank you.
Yeah, a lot of good discussion. We didn't even have time to go into our open-ended question, but really that's explanatory. So if you have any additional comments, feedback, given the industry updates, our project challenges that we described, anything at all, please feel free to contact any one of us. And thanks again for all your participation, all your great feedback. It's really helpful. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Hope you all have a good rest of your week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.